Hi, I'm Dr. John Neufeld, and you're watching Back to the Bible Canada. Welcome back. I've been starting a series on the book of Proverbs, just a couple of lessons from the early chapters of Proverbs to get us a taste for this, such an important book, learning to live with wisdom, having skill in making the decisions in life that lead to the best possible outcomes. Not that we simply learn this apart from God, it's always a part of our faith in Christ. But Proverbs is such an important book to learn, and it is commended especially for the young. But even if you're not young and you're watching this, it's also commended for you. Well, I've come to the third chapter of the book of Proverbs, and I'm going to only cover the first 12 verses. But let me try to introduce this and set the stage. I want you to imagine with me for just a moment that you're going across a frozen lake in the wintertime. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter. You've got to get to the other side. No bridges, and you've got to cross the frozen lake. But as you're doing it, you're afraid because you've seen heard of all sorts of stories of people breaking through a lake and what happens, and they just can't crawl back out onto the ice, and eventually they die in the water. So you're afraid of that, and you're very aware that the ice might start cracking. So you've also heard that in order to be safe, that if you spread out your weight somewhat, you do better on ice. And so you get on all fours, and it's a long crossing, and you begin to, make your way, and you're listening for sounds of cracking, and you're terrified as you go. And soon after a while, you begin to recognize how cold your knees and your hands are becoming, and you recognize the telltale signs of frostbite. And then as you're going, oh, so carefully, you hear a roar in the background, and you wonder whether or not all the ice is now breaking, and you're soon going to plunge to your death. And then you realize, no, it's not the ice breaking that you're hearing, but you look over your shoulder, and what do you see but a series of pickup trucks? And they're all the weekend ice fishermen. They're driving right onto the ice, and their pickup trucks and everything else. And clearly, you've misjudged the ice. It's a lot thicker than you had ever imagined. Well, I want to use that as an illustration of how some believers think about the promises of God. They're not so sure that the promises are going to hold if you really put them to the test. So whenever they approach promises from God, they're kind of like down on their hands and knees, crawling across, afraid to take risks, thinking that at any point in time, any one of the promises might not hold, and they're going to break through. Now, if that sounds like you, I have the first 12 verses of Proverbs chapter 3 to get you to consider. Now, what we're going to find as we read through these 12 verses, and I'm going to read through all of them just to make sure we get a feel for it, but let me already warm you up in terms of what it is that we're going to find. In these 12 verses, we're going to find 6 sayings, verses 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. It's always going to come in 2-verse sets. And in the saying, you're going to find that, first of all, you get a command from God, and then the command is followed by a promise. Do this, and in consequence, this is what's going to happen. So look for that as I'm reading through this. Watch the commands, then the promise, then we'll go back to a command and a promise, and so forth. So bear with me now. We're going to read Proverbs chapter 3, and I hope you've got a Bible. Open it up, find Proverbs chapter 3, and I'm going to read through the first 12 verses. Listen to the commands and the promises. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and of man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. He will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof, for the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son whom he delights. So I hope as you were listening, you heard the commands and you heard the promises. And so we're going to go through all of those and find out what these things have to do with wisdom and why keeping the commands of wisdom leads to the results that are promised there. And as we're going through that, I'm going to find out whether you're walking boldly across the ice or whether you're crawling timidly across, wondering whether or not the promises are too good to be true. You ready? Let's start with verses 1 and 2, and it has to do with delighting in the Lord, or delighting in the commandments and the promises that follow. So look again at verses 1 and 2. Let's watch the command, and you'll see it in verse 1. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. Now, do you notice there's this idea of not forgetting and then letting your heart keep the commandments? So you see two things. So the first is don't forget. See, Proverbs, because it's telling us about the wisdom verses that are going to follow from chapter 9 all the way pretty well through to the end of the book, it says you're going to want to make sure that you don't forget the things or the lessons about wisdom that you have. So really, we're going back to something that is now a theme in these early chapters, and the theme is, look, you need this repetition. You can't forget. You've got to go over the Proverbs, the wisdom material over and over again so that you don't forget. There's a degree of memorization that goes on when you're going through Proverbs. And then the second half of verse 1 says, let your heart keep my commandments. So you notice on the one hand, there's a command to the intellect. I mean, you go back over these things, memorize them, and now there's a command to the heart. Now, it's more than just a command to the emotion. It's, the heart in the Bible is the control center for the whole human being. It's everything from, the intellect to the emotions. But really what the heart is all about, it's the strong inclinations of the soul. May your soul be inclined towards the teaching of the Lord. So that's the whole issue that behind all of this. I've put it this way, love God's commands, and it drives you to remember God's commands. You see, if your heart is inclined to want this stuff, then you're also going to want to memorize this. Now, if you do that, if you find wisdom literature to be desirable, if getting wise is important to you so that you memorize some of the precepts, then here's the promise that follows. If you do that, if you incline your heart towards the commandments and you don't forget the teaching, look at the promise in verse 2. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Now there's a whole wallop of promises that follow. So let me take the last of them because that's the easiest one to deal with. It says it's going to give peace to you. The Hebrew word for peace is the word shalom. And it probably means more than simply peace. I've put down a number of words. It means tranquility. It means fullness. It means harmony. It means prosperity. It means wholeness. It just basically means the life that becomes content. And that's what's going to happen. You're going to have this kind of a deep, settled peace in your own soul if you do the commands. Now, that's the easy part. I think most of us, when we hear that part of the promise, we'd say, yeah, I get that. If I learn the commands of wisdom well, I'm going to be a deeply contented human being. Yeah, that sounds like a really good promise. But how about the first part of that? Length of days and years of life will be added to you. Now, a lot of people will say, you know what, I'm not so sure about that. So I have a couple of things that I've written down about that. You know that a number of us looking at this and say, I just don't get it, that if you learn wisdom, what does that mean? You're going to live 90 years of age and more. Is that what it promised? Because if that's what it promises, I don't know that there was anyone as wise as Jesus. And he was cut down in his 30s by sinful and evil men. I mean, we do know that sometimes persecution comes upon believers, and all manner of ill can come upon them. It's not just persecution. We know that there are all manner of illnesses. I mean, cancer. You can be a godly man or woman, you can have cancer, and you can die before you reach the fullness of years. So you might think about those as examples and say, hey, I'm just not sure that this is as good as it promises. So, a couple of things I want to say. The book of Proverbs does seem to promise wealth and health to the wise. That's just undeniable. For instance, Proverbs 14:24 says, "The crown of the wise is their wealth, but the folly of fools brings folly." So, the crown of the wise, it's you get wealth. I mean, you learn to live wisely, you're going to be financially better off. That's what it does promise. It's true. It's what it's there. However, not always. Listen to some other Proverbs, because it seems to say the opposite. Proverbs 11:16, "A gracious woman gets honor, and violent men get riches." That's an interesting thing. It's not only true that wise men get riches, but violent men do so as well. And then Proverbs 13:23 says, "The fallow ground of the poor would yield much fruit, much food, but it is swept away through injustice." In other words, there are all sorts of people who work hard in the way that Proverbs commends, and then along come wicked people and take away everything they have. We all know that's true. How about this in Proverbs 16, verse 8? "Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice." See, Proverbs acknowledges there are people that are unjust and they get great wealth. And there are people who are righteous and they have very little. That actually does happen. So, the book of Proverbs does give us seemingly both sides of the equation. So I come back to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 2, where it says, "If you don't forget the teaching on wisdom and your heart is inclined towards it, you find it delightful to learn wisdom, well, you're going to get length of days and years of life." Well, how is that so? Some people say, well, it's just a general rule. There are all sorts of exceptions. So, it's a general rule. Generally, under most circumstances, that's what happens, but stuff can cut in. Well, I think if that's how you view Proverbs, as simply, this is where the odds lie, as some put it, if that's how you think of it, I don't think there's any comfort to this at all, because there's no promise, because Proverbs commands us to keep wisdom perfectly, and then does it only promise that God will reward us, uncertainly. It just doesn't seem like a good deal. So a couple of things that we should keep in mind. If you go back to Proverbs 2, verse 7 and 8, it says, "He," that is God, "stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice, watching over the way of his saints." So it does promise that if you learn wisdom, God will watch over you, and he's going to protect you along the way. I'm going to say more about that as we study this passage. So, there it is. I mean, Proverbs does say that God is going to guard the wise. But does that mean we're going to live all long lives? So here's a couple of things I want us to consider. Proverbs 22, verse 8 says, "Whoever sows injustice will reap calamity, and the rod of his fury will fail." That is, the rod of the fury of the unjust person. The person who says, "I'm going to get my way through my own unrighteous deeds, no matter who I cheat, no matter who I lie to, no matter who I rob, I'll get everything that I want." See, the rod of that fury, says Proverbs, is going to fail. So here's the question. When exactly does that rod fail? You ever wonder that? I mean, but it is implied. Eventually, that's implied. Eventually it will. Okay? But how long is eventually? Well, God's answer is always the same throughout the entire Bible. The answer is in due season. That's when it fails. Well, when God's timing is right. I love what some, wise individual has said. It says God's justice may grind slowly, but it grinds exceedingly fine. In due time, God will bring justice. Okay, that's fine. So now look at Proverbs 24, 15, and 16. Let me read it to you. It says, "Lie not in wait as a wicked man against the dwelling of the righteous. Do no violence to his home, for the righteous falls 7 times and rises again. But the wicked stumble in times of calamity." So in other words, the righteous do fall. There are times when it seems like the wicked win the battle over the righteous, and they have them where they want them. And Proverbs says, yeah, but that's only for a season. In the long haul, what's going to happen to the righteous? They're going to rise again. And again, we're left with the question, when does that happen? In due season. Well, what's due season? See, the fact is, wisdom does bring a long and contented life. Even if you're cut down, you're going to rise again. Well, in order to understand that, you've got to go to the New Testament. You got to go to the story of Christ, crucified by sinful men, risen from the dead, and all of those who are in Christ will rise with him. I'm going to say there's an eternal component that's here. Yeah, length of days are promised, but not necessarily in this world. You see what I'm saying? Length of days are promised to the wise person eternally. If you want to live eternally with great peace, the contented life, satisfaction that goes on forever, then you're going to want to do this. Don't forget the teaching of the Lord. Rehearse the teaching of the Lord and let your heart be inclined to keeping it. Find his teaching a delight. See, that's the promise that's given. So that's a wonderful promise. The promise is that, in the short term, bad things do happen to some very righteous people. But in the long term, God, who is perfectly just, will sort the matter out. Now, I'm going to say more about that, but that's the first promise that's there. See, the ice is a lot thicker than you thought. The promises will hold in all of eternity. You've got to get bold in them. So let's look at the second set. It's found in verse 3 and 4. So first the command, let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So there's the command. Don't let steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. So when we speak about steadfast love, we can talk about love in terms of three things. Sometimes we speak about love as charity, acts of graciousness to the poor and the needy. Sometimes when the Bible speaks about love, it speaks about the forgiveness of enemies. Those who hate us, we offer forgiveness and the offer of reconciliation. Sometimes when we talk about love, we also speak about affection, simply acts of kindness. In fact, deep inner feelings of love towards someone, but also deep inner feelings of love towards God. Well, it says, make love steadfast, ongoing. Make it be the one defining feature of your life. Be known as a man or a woman of love. See, may that define you. Don't let that forever forsake you. Always be loving in all your ways and faithful as well. See, faithful is a very important word. See, I was looking around for, synonyms for faithfulness, and I thought about, consistency. In other words, be consistently a loving individual. And then it says, bind that around your neck. Now, in the ancient world, when you had something really precious, people often, because you couldn't count on banks and you couldn't really dig it underneath your own house because thieves could break in. So what did people do with something that was really valuable? Well, if it was you could carry it in your hand, you'd put a hole through it and you'd wear it as a necklace and you'd have it under your clothing. You'd bind it on your neck so that it would always be with you. And that's what it says. Bind them around your neck. Make steadfast love and faithfulness so valuable to you that it always is precious. And if you do that, you'll find favor and good success with God and with man. Now, you're going to find it with God, but you're also going to find it with man. In other words, even some people who hate you are going to have to admit, look, that person does stand for truth, and that person is kind even to their enemies. See, that's the promise that's given. Okay, that's number 2. Now let's look at number 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. So this is so important. Now, if you want to know how it is that we trust in the Lord, understand that the Lord has given us a book, his Bible. This is his word. So what you want to do is to say, I'm going to trust in the Lord with all my heart. So everyone puts their trust in something. You know it, and I know it. We live in a world where people commonly say, you got to believe in yourself. And to that I say, horse hockey pucks. Absolutely, this is ludicrous. What you want to do is not trust in yourself. You're going to want to trust in the Lord. Believe that his word is faithful and true. Don't lean on your own understanding. Don't say, I've always kind of thought in this way. I have this gut feeling that this is what I should be doing with my life. No. You want to trust in the Lord. You want to trust in the God who made you and who designed you. You want to trust in the manufacturer's specifications for your life. You want to do that with all your heart, with your entire being. And you want to, the last verse, in all your ways, acknowledge him. That is, in everything that happens in life, acknowledge God's hands. Sometimes we talk about the providential hand of God. That is, regardless of what happens in life, trust that God is in it. Acknowledge his presence in all that you go through. And then here's the promise. He will make straight your paths. Now, you see, crooked paths are paths that constantly lead us into danger. Sometimes there's going to be a big pit that you might fall into, or sometimes there's a dead end, or sometimes, attackers await you. But a straight path is the idea of a straight path is that all of the difficulties that could assail you are straightened out. That is, if you learn to trust in God with all your heart, there are all manner of difficulties that could fell you, that could destroy your life, that God is going to remove before you get there. See, here's what I believe is going to happen in heaven. You and I won't have any idea of all of the places where God has rescued us from trouble. We have no idea. The rescue already happened before we arrived to that place on the road where the trouble would have destroyed us. God took it away in advance. But when you and I get to heaven, we're going to find out how many difficulties God has rescued us from. So here's the command. Trust in God with all your heart, and you will find out eventually all of the troubles that God has delivered you from. So there's the third set. Here's the fourth. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. There's the command. Don't be wise in your own eyes. And I had to think about something, so I made a note of this. And it comes this way. I was listening to a radio talk show some time ago, and here's what the talk show host said. This man was castigating religious people who always need to go for divine advice for problems. He was kind of mocking that idea. And here's what he says. What's wrong with just good old-fashioned common sense? That's what he asked. I found myself, I was in my car listening, and I found myself laughing as he spoke this way. I thought about the Hubble telescope that has revealed to us not only stars, vast stars far away, some millions of light years away. That in itself is a staggering thought. That when you look at the sky, you're looking at ancient history as to what those stars presently look like. You have no idea, because all that you see is what they looked like a million years ago. Just think about that. Think about the grandeur of the universe. I think also that sometimes when the Hubble telescope shows us what appear to be stars, just numerous stars, when they zoom in closer, they're not stars at all. They're entire galaxies. The vastness of a world that the great Creator has put together, the intelligence, the physical principles by which the universe is governed, the wisdom that was required to put all things together is a wisdom that is so vast, it's impossible for any mind to grasp infinite wisdom, but that's who the Creator is. For someone to say, what's wrong with good old-fashioned common sense when I could throw away infinite wisdom? Can you imagine the folly of that approach? Can you imagine the individual that says, I'd rather go with 3 pounds of gray matter between my ears than to trust in infinite wisdom? Oh my, the foolishness of saying that, and yet there are some that do. So look again what it says. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Don't say to yourself, I'm amazed at how much stuff I've got figured out. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to fear the Lord, turn away from evil, and watch this. It will be healing to your flesh. It's going to be refreshment to your bones. What it's promising you, it's going to require peace. You think about the kind of decisions that foolish people make that result in, get this, stress, anger, anxiety, worry. How about frustration? How about bitterness? How about a lack of purpose and the depression that follows, the despair that comes from having no purpose in life? How about the lack of joy that's often missing in people who have no overwhelming sense of the knowledge of God? You say, humility takes all of those things away. It brings healing to your flesh. Oh my. If you learn simply to say, I'm going to be humble, and I'm going to say that the wisdom of God is greater than mine, and therefore I'm going to learn his. That's another piece of advice. Now look at verse 9, where suddenly, you have, all the way from verses 1 to verse 8, it's speaking more theoretically, but then you get to verse 9. This is really fascinating because when you get to verse 9, Solomon, who's writing Proverbs, says, let me get now very specific and get one example of how everything I've been talking about can be used in one specific area, and that's money. Watch verse 9 and 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. There's the command, here's the promise. Then your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will be bursting with wine. Now, here's where a lot of people are going to say, I just don't believe it. The ice is a lot thinner than that. If I do this, if I trust that, I'm going to break through and I'm going to have nothing. The world is filled with misers. The world's filled with people who are grasping at every last penny they can get a hold of. And they're afraid that if they share something with someone else, it's going to be too much. In Canada, I understand, and by the way, this has happened to my wife and I don't want to sound like I'm boasting here, but we have frequently been investigated at tax time because it seemed impossible to the tax department that we were giving as much as we were. The average Canadian gives less than 1%. They think they've cut their arm off if they, give somebody $5. The idea of, tithing, 10% off your gross income, and you do it right off the top, because watch how it goes. It says, honor the Lord with your wealth. So you're going to want to do that. You want to take your wealth and you want to bring praise and glory to God with it. And how so? With the first fruits of all your produce. The first fruits is a principle. It's found in the Old Testament. It was done at the beginning of the harvest season. So before your harvest came in, and you didn't know whether maybe hail was going to come and destroy your crops, but you take that first 10% of what you have and you offer it up to God while the rest of the harvest is still standing and vulnerable out in the field. You offer to God the best that you have right up at the start before you're given any guarantees of anything else. That's what first fruit is all about. It's like when you get your paycheck, before you spend anything else, you carve off that tithe and you say, that much belongs to God. Will there be enough? Well, I don't know, but I know that much belongs to God. I'm honoring him with that. See, that's the command. You see, there are very few people that actually do that. I've sometimes said, if all Canadian Christians were to tithe, we'd be looking to plant more churches, build more church buildings, send more missionaries out, do more gospel presentations all over the world, make Bibles available to more, give more to persecuted believers. It might lead to a revival. But the fact is that a great many Canadian Christians are saying, look, if I do first fruit giving, that I give off the top and not the bottom. You see, a lot of people will look to say, what's left over and I'll give after that. Rather, first fruit giving says, I'll skim it right off before I spend anything else, and I'm going to leave it up to the Lord to take care of me. Here's the promise. And notice again, your barns will be filled with plenty. Your vats will be bursting with wine. I think it was Templeton, the man who founded what was then the Templeton Funds, had said that in his experience, the wealthiest people that invested with him are people that practiced tithing for a lifetime. That's an interesting thing. I mean, you know what? Here's the thing. If this is where all of these other promises that are given, here's where you want to test the Lord. Find out if it's really true. Give over the top and see whether or not God will take care of you. See, that's what Proverbs says. Go ahead, find out whether the ice will hold. See, a lot of us, we're so timid, we're, sprawled all across the ice, we're getting frostbitten everywhere. We're afraid to inch our way across the lake because we're not sure the promises are going to hold, when there are others driving their pickup trucks and semis across the ice because they know the promises of God will never fail. And then comes the last of these commands and promises, verse 11 and 12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof. You say, well, why this? Why this in the end of this? Because if you think about what we've been reading up till now, I'm going to say it looks like this. We've been told if we delight in wisdom, we'll have a long, contented life. Then we're told if we commit to love and truth, we'll be held in a high esteem by God and man. Then thirdly, we're told if we trust God completely, he's going to remove life's obstacles from us. Then we're told if we learn humility, we will avoid many of life's physical and emotional diseases. And then we're told if we practice first fruit giving, we're going to gain financial wealth. So then why are we told this? Well, I think here's why. If we let the Lord discipline us and not be weary of his reproof, then notice the promise. The Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father his son whom he delights. Look, if you go through difficulties because you're keeping the commands of God, understand this, God's involved. So I have a little story I'd like to tell. I was in grade 8. I was 13 years of age. And back in those days, it was, the free love and flower generation. I was still on the tail end of the hippie generation. And I remember I had a course in English in grade 8, and my prof, his name was Bruce, and Bruce changed the class. We threw out the tables and chairs, we threw out books and writing implements, and we put in couches, and we just hung around, and we interacted with each other. And when it was time for marks, Bruce, I see his name was Bruce because he didn't let us call us Mr., just Bruce. And I remember he came to me and he said, what kind of mark would you want? So we could determine the marks we would want in this grade 8 English class. And it was the greatest class in the world because we just hung out and we did whatever we wanted to do. It was fantastic. And in the end of the day, we could get any mark we wanted. Man, I liked Bruce. Halfway through the year, the administration got so upset with this guy, they fired him. And halfway through the year, we got a new teacher, and his name was not Bruce. His name was Mr. Barry. And Mr. Barry, the first day after Bruce was fired, and we showed up in class, and we noticed that all the couches were gone, and the tables and chairs were back in rows. And Mr. Barry had a demeanor about him that everybody knew. You don't mess with Mr. Barry. And he told us we'd wasted half the year and we're going to make up for it in the last half, and we're going to do more work than we'd ever done in our lives. And everyone knew, wow, the lessons had changed in that class. And here's what I wanted to say. I remember something about Mr. Barry. And here's what I remembered. You see, because I'm older now, and as I reflect on that year, I've come to understand my two teachers quite well. Mr. Barry was a stern disciplinarian, but after a while, everyone in the class recognized that he had an amazingly gentle and a loving heart. And here's what I learned. Bruce hated me. Mr. Barry loved me because he was interested in my future. Let me read from C.S. Lewis. He says, God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks to us in our conscience, but he shouts to us in our pain. He goes on to say, the artist will rub off and scrape off a painting many times, so much so, if the painting could feel, it would cry out in pain. And then Lewis said, when we complain in our sufferings, we are in fact asking for less love and not for more. Look again at verses 9 and 10. Verses 11 and 12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, the hardships that God takes you through, or be weary at his reproof, because here's the promise. The Lord reproves him whom he loves. In other words, God will intervene when you're not acting wisely, and he will cut in onto your path, and he'll remind you of the importance of wisdom. As a father, the son in whom delights, as a godly father in the son whom he delights, whom he watches over, like my Mr. Barry, who said, I'm not going to let you go your own way. I'm going to make scholars of every one of you in this class so that down the road you'll be able to read and write and comprehend well, so that you'll have success in your future. I'm going to cut in to your own pathway. That's what a loving father does. So here's the truth about wisdom. Incline your heart to it. Love the stuff. And notice this. It's not just a series of commands, is it? In fact, attached to the commands are promises. So when we find commands and promises, what must we do? The answer is, we must believe that the God who made the promises is as good as his word. He never promises and then doesn't deliver. The ice is a lot thicker than you thought. If you trust in God, he will keep his commands. He will keep his promises to you. So simply do this. Lord, I'll do what you ask me to do because you've promised the best possible eternity that there could be. That's the meaning of wisdom. Thanks for watching today. God bless you. Wishing you a marvelous day. May the Lord be with you. Thank you for watching today, and I want to ask you to make sure that you hit the like button and also subscribe to this channel so that you can receive any further notifications of all the videos that we prepare for you. Thank you so much for being a part of Back to the Bible Canada.